Hi, this is a presentation on key components in planning, implementing, and monitoring a behavior change communication campaign that increased condom use among sale clients of sex workers in southern India. My presentation is going to focus specifically on question number 3, which was health disparities and health inequities. My name is Jessica Coleman. I'm a recent graduate of the University of Queensland Oshner Clinical School and it's getting my MPH here at the University of Arkansas Medical Sciences. This is for our Health, Behavior, and Education group project. And today is September 26, 2019. So first we're going to go into overview of my presentation. So like I said, we're discussing question number 3. Question number 3 is which health disparities are being addressed in the condom use promotion program? Are these health disparities also health inequities? Are all health disparities also health inequities? If there's a difference, what is it? Provide examples to justify your answer. Additionally, identify appropriate reference groups for assessing the health disparities addressed in the program. Justify all your answers. So of these, we're going to focus on which health disparities are being addressed in the condom use promotion program. So as reading the paper will show you, this is focused on HIV prevalence in India, which has 10% of all HIV cases in the world. There's specifically a high distribution in India in sex workers, clients and partners of sex workers, men who have sex with men, and IV drug users. The study specifically focuses on male commercial sex clients and non-condom users or inconsistent users. They found that 62% of male clients of specifically female sex workers had a consistent use of condoms, while overall 75% of male clients of sex workers, including female and males, were using condoms consistently. It also focused on a geographical distribution of HIV. So they found 100 high priority towns in India based on the amount of sex workers and the HIV prevalence in those areas. There's also a focus on socioeconomic classes C, D, and E, which are low education and low income. These were suggested by the Indian government to be the best target areas, and also included a chart here because I was curious to see what classified in this area in India. And so you can see that Class C is the middle class, Class D is the lower middle class, and Class E is the lower class. You can also look up on the internet to find more specific. There's a very complex system to calculate which class is in that's based off of education, income, and other factors as well. I also wanted to note that men were recognized as a target group in this study because they can bridge the high-risk groups to the general population, and they also control the decision about condom use in encounters with sex workers. And so the idea here is that by addressing this group of men specifically, they can also reach clients and partners of sex workers and also reach sex workers themselves indirectly. So next, are these health disparities also health inequities? And so I made a Venn diagram here just to outline this and make it easier to understand. And so the health disparities I found in the study were low socioeconomic status, low education, high prevalence of HIV, men, clients of sex workers, partners of sex workers, and geographical distribution. So the ones that also classify as the health inequities I brought over to the other half of the Venn diagram, which were low socioeconomic status, low education, high prevalence of HIV, clients of sex workers, and partners of sex workers. And to justify this, I'm going to discuss this in my next slide, which is on health disparities versus health inequities. So health disparities are classified as differences in the burden of disease, injury, violence, or opportunities to achieve optimal health that are experienced by socially disadvantaged populations. These are often, the populations here are often race or ethnicity, gender, education, or income. Can also be disability, geographic location, or sexual orientation. This is not an exhaustive list. There can also be other categories as well. These are generally a result of poverty, environmental threats, education, inadequate access to healthcare, and individual and behavioral factors. Whereas health inequities are similar to this, but they are differences in health that are unnecessary and avoidable, and also are unfair or unjust. These normally stem from specific social injustices, and they're unjust and often related to the historical and current unequal distribution of social, political, economic environment. And so, are all health disparities health inequities? What is the difference? Provide examples. So this slide is specifically going to focus on health disparities. So for women suffer chronic disease more often: depression, immunological disease, knee osteoarthritis, sports injuries, osteoporosis, difficulty quitting smoking. Metabolism of nicotine is faster in women, and so they attribute this to the difficulties quitting. They also present differently with myocardial infarctions or heart attacks, which makes them harder to catch ahead of time. They're less likely to seek early preventative treatment, and this is mostly stems from a caretaker personality. And for men have a higher death rate from chronic disease. They also experience liver disease and injuries more than women. They also have a higher osteoporosis morbidity, have a higher birth weight, a higher rate of hematological disorders. And the next group is going to be African Americans. African Americans are more likely to die from diabetes, cancer, and heart disease. They're also the #1 group for HIV. They also have a high infant mortality. They also have a high burden of sickle cell disease. And overall, they have the highest death rate from diabetes, cancer, and cardiac disease. American Indians have a higher death due to diabetes, homicide, self-harm, liver disease, chronic respiratory diseases. Overall, they have a disproportionate disease burden, a shorter lifespan, and substance abuse problems. Whites, overall, have a high death rate due to cancer and heart disease. Binge drinking. Hispanics are similar to African Americans in a lot of ways. They have a death due to diabetes, cardiovascular disease, and obesity. Asian Pacific Islanders tend to have a lower death rate for diabetes, cancer, and heart disease. They're the #2 group for HIV. They also have a high rate of tropical disease. Low education tend to have obesity, substance abuse problems, intentional and unintentional injury. Higher educations tend to have a longer life and are healthier people. Low income tend to suffer from cardiovascular disease, mental health, diabetes, obesity, and substance abuse problems. Disabled people tend to have cardiovascular disease, obesity, substance abuse problems, and a lack of preventive care. Veterans specifically are at risk for mental health disorders and substance abuse disorders. Rural people tend to have an overall higher disease burden and delayed treatment, as well as reduced access to care. Urban groups tend to have a high exposure to pollutants. And the LGBTQ community tends to have a higher rate of psychiatric disorder, substance abuse problems, and suicide, as well as a delayed detection of disease and a higher rate of HIV and AIDS. And so to address this question again, are all health disparities also health inequities? No, they're not, but they often do overlap greatly. And so we're providing examples here. I've included all the information from the previous slide, but I've highlighted the ones specifically here that are health inequities. For women, that's chronic disease, depression, knee osteoarthritis, and less likely to seek early prevention and treatment. Men, we have a death from chronic disease, liver disease, injuries, osteoporosis, morbidity. African Americans, a death to disease, diabetes, cancer, heart disease, HIV, infant mortality, and the highest death rates from diabetes, cancer, and cardiac disease. American Indians, the death due to diabetes, homicide, self-harm, liver disease, chronic respiratory disease, and disproportionate disease burden, as well as a shorter lifespan. Whites, binge drinking. Hispanics, death to diabetes, cardiovascular disease, and obesity. Asian Pacific Islanders, so the lowest death rates for diabetes, cancer, heart disease, and the number 2 for HIV. Low education, obesity, substance abuse, intentional and unintentional injury. High education, none that I could find. Lower income, cardiovascular disease, mental health, diabetes, obesity, and substance abuse. Disabled, cardiovascular disease, obesity, substance abuse, and the lack of preventative care. Veterans, mental health disorders, substance abuse. Rural, overall disease burden, delayed treatment, and reduced access to care. And for LGBTQ, all of the ones listed previously. So the best way to think about this is that health disparities are simply the differences, often due to socioeconomic, but they would be some with genetics and also gender. Health inequities don't tend to be a biological difference, that there was something in society or the economics or the environment where they were that has predisposed them to getting the disease. They weren't predisposed at birth, is the way that I would recommend thinking about it. So next, what reference groups in the program are addressed for assessing the health disparity? Well, first I want to talk about the actions taken by the study to address the groups. And so the study was focusing on increased access to condoms, improved access to proper treatment for sexually transmitted infections, and create demand for a proper treatment for STIs in the community, and education. And the specific focus they used was on inconsistent condom users. And so, like I previously discussed, they focused on inconsistent condom users compared to consistent condom users, specifically in men who engaged in sexual acts with sex workers, whether they were male or female. And so they found this was the best way to reach that group, and then also indirectly reaching the other groups that we discussed previously, like their partners of the men who engage with sex workers, as well as the sex workers themselves and the sex workers' partners. In summary, health disparities are differences in disease burden. Health inequities are preventative and unjust differences. Both of these overlap quite a bit, but not all health disparities are health inequities. This paper specifically focused on inconsistent condom users, men in areas with high prevalence of disease in India, men who engage with sex workers, and just men overall, as it was difficult for them to distinguish who was actually engaging with sex workers versus who was not. I also wanted to include this. This is a picture from the study that they gave to just give a good indication of the prevalence of the disease. This is not with the disease in men. This is with the disease in women in clinics in India. I just thought it would be good to see the area that we are reaching. And these are my references. We've got references from the CDC, the Boston Public Health Commission, a lot of references from the NIH, and also from the Indian Health Service. That's Native American Indians, not India. And they'll also include some other references here for like the healthy people. Thank you, and if you have any questions, send me an email or comment on this post.